Well, we're getting started. I wanted to review a couple things today that I think will be very helpful in having a courageous conversation. I get asked all the time from various people, like, how do we help people? Um, you know, who seem to be on the divide that we're preaching to the choir, that we are not able to talk to the people who really need to be convinced to go a different direction. So I actually took some time to find some resources and understand how we could have a conversation with people who may be, let's say, in a cult. And so specifically, I found this resource called Leaving MAGA, and I wanted to review this resource and add some suggestions for what I think we can do in terms of incorporating these conversations in with our family members or people that we work with, and that we're often in this situation in which we don't want to get into that political conversation. But the truth is, we have to be able to have these brave conversations. And since I lead a number of different groups in facilitating conversation, talking about the difference between dialogue and debate, if you want to know more about that, please put something in the comments and I'll do a piece that's specifically about that, because there's so much about what we should be thinking about to actually move into a space of dialogue. But I hear all the time, people just don't seem to care. And what I want you to know is that more often than not, people who you are concerned about who don't seem to care are in their own echo chamber, and therefore really have been sort of conditioned to hear everything that you might want to say that's from a different perspective, and to put up a hand signal, that basically is blocking hearing anything different. And so this is a cool resource that I came across, that is basically saying it's a how-to guide for talking to your family and friends who are in MAGA. And in the beginning, what they're talking about is that, most of followers, we really have to approach people with the idea that there is good there, that there is care there, that this is a person. So you can't approach them with a whole lot of anger and frustration. You can't, you know, think that somehow they're just uninformed. I think what we really need to recognize is that people have been informed in a very specific way. And by the way, I'm a psychologist, so this is the way I think about brains. We filter out information that doesn't conform with the ways that we already think. And so we just need to know that some people are going to hear information, which I'm sure you have at some point in your life, and if it fits the kind of, life you've had, your own lived experience, then you'll take that information in. And if you hear information that doesn't go along with what you've had in terms of your life experience, you will exclude it. So there's some fancy terms that we could go into of what that actually means, but I think that's less important. So the things that we want to do, and I will make sure that there's a link to be able to get to this document, but I'm going to make a few little tweaks on what I think how you can use this in just having the conversation. So, first off, it's good to think about the things that you can do to have these conversations. And he says in this document, um, things to do. So, first, you want to look for relatability, right? So, what are some things personally that you might have in common? Thinking about that common ground, and have a long enough conversation that this person actually feels like you have heard them. So, it's not enough to like ask the question and have a person say, "Oh, I really am excited about, this baseball team, and, who a new player that they have on," or something like that. And then you just skip right over it. So like you actually need to have a long conversation where they feel heard. The way I would interpret that is that you are going to be aiming to have a conversation for at least 20 minutes, instead of, you know, the 2 seconds that sometimes we ask a question and then we get right to the thing that we really want to talk about. Okay, so that's the first part. You have to find something that they care about, that you can have some kind of common space of relating to. And, that could be your family, that could be, sometimes people are like, it's not um, servicey, but, whether it could actually be something, I just want to encourage you to think about finding a way to connect with a family member or a colleague and actually having a real conversation, something that lights you up and lights them up. Okay. So the second tip is that you want to try to understand why they believe what they believe. This is true on any topic. So this particularly is regarding MAGA, but I would say on any spectrum, we would want to find out why do they believe what they believe. So is this a way to do this, as they said in this document, is to ask, what are your values and your beliefs, that you've come in with, and to see if that information is accurate. What you want to ask is like, where did you learn it? And really be patient and keep asking to find out more about, how they learned what they've learned. So I want to share or have you think about this because so often in our, conversations with people, we are just easily dismissing folks. We're like, who are you listening to? So there could be a tone in the way that you ask that question. You need to really work on some things to center yourself so that you can have this conversation. This is all about a courageous conversation. And really explore, like, how did they get to believe what they believe? All right, so you're going to wait for the answer. You're going to be courteous. You're going to listen. You're going to try to really engage. And, one of my tips with these things is that maybe you need to have had your coffee, you need to eat, you need to sleep. So don't just try and have this conversation if you are not prepared yourself to have this kind of conversation. The next tip that they suggest is that you want to try to open up a respectful back and forth by asking something such as, I can understand some of the reasons why you would want, you know, right now it is 2025, it is July, and there's a lot of conversation around the border. And so maybe you would say something about, I understand why you want, safety, or why you're concerned about the economy. I understand why you feel like the government, has historically not worked. Do you, and then the follow-up with this, which is what you're getting to, is, do you understand some of the reasons why others, and then you talk about the other perspective, right? Like, so you could say, do you understand the reasons why others are concerned or want to see a path to citizenship, right? Are you aware, or do you understand some of the reasons why people, want to see their healthcare actually expanded instead of retracted? Have you talked to, I'll say for my own self, what it's like to run a small business and how important it is to have, what our perspectives might be in terms of healthcare and support from the government. So in terms of less government, just in terms of, kind of looking at things from two different sides. And then the next thing that they say as the strategy for having these conversations, which I love, this is like my favorite thing in anything in working with anybody, is to ask permission. Okay, I'm pausing on that because so often we are ready to give our perspective, give our story, share what we know, what we've learned, and we haven't done, like, actually figured out, are they ready to take information in? So, not what is being said here, but what I've experienced in having these kinds of conversations. We need to create a space where people have had a chance to kind of get out and just say whatever it is they're going to say. And it might be pretty ouchy, but we need to let them get it out, and then we can then they're in a position to take information in. But to do that, you need to ask permission. So what you would do is to say, um, can I ask, you a question? It, how would you feel? if blah blah blah. Like you're gonna add whatever it is you want to add as your conversation. But to basically ask their permission to say, could I share with you some of the information that I've learned, or would you be open to us revisiting this conversation in another couple days? And, maybe you can bring one of the resources that, you have found that you're basing your ideas on, and I can bring some of what I'm bringing. And so this is what you're really trying to do is create a space for them to get curious. And I think that too often we are not aware of how important curiosity is in supporting people's growth. That when we are curious, that creates an opportunity to be able to challenge the status quo. And so in this, we want to be able to do that. Now, the next thing they do is they go through the whole list of the things not to do. And so I am sure many of you are thinking about the conversations that you have and how easy you get stuck. And so if this is familiar, then you can like say, yes, I do this all the time. So some things that you want to not do that you might be doing is there's a tendency for us to lean heavily on biography, credentials, and expertise. This is from Harvard, this is from Yale, this is the latest from this expert, blah, blah, blah. Um, so that's going to be important to try to avoid. And to not show up, even for this, it might be helpful to say, don't say that Dr. Hawkins told you this, right? So that would be a thing. The next thing to not do, and this is good too in this video, like I wanted to start off with the things to do because we need to prime our brains for that first, and then talk about the things not to do. All right. What you want to not do is attack, right? Um, you want to try to be careful to not question that person's intelligence or their integrity. And sometimes we can do that in a way that's like a little bit on that sarcastic side of things. So you want to be mindful of that. You're trying to be really courteous, right? Your first goal is actually to connect and to bond on something that you have in common. All right. And then you want to also avoid criticizing people from whatever group they might be in. And that those critiques, what you have to think about is that often those critiques are taken personally. So this is what they're saying. And I would agree with this. Um, I have definitely seen that when this is an interesting story, right? Like they say this in dating when the your partner takes you out and you see a good movie and you compliment the movie, then they feel like that's a compliment like to them. So they're gonna like take it personally. And so the same can go with the other direction. So you take them and you didn't like the movie, then they feel like, even though they're not responsible for the movie or any of that necessarily, then they're gonna take it personally, that they chose this, terrible movie to take you to. So anyway, I think it's important that as we think about criticizing, we want to really avoid doing the criticizing. They also talk about and say to avoid debating facts and policy. So, in my work and in the conversations, which is one of the reasons why I'm showing up here, is that oftentimes people are always asking for, to be reminded of the things that I teach and that we teach in our work with both end partners. And so we do a lot where we talk about the difference between dialogue and debate, and those are important things to be aware of. So when you're debating, what you're actually doing is that you're separating, on purpose. You're coming up with how I'm going to stay on one side versus the other. Debate in itself creates division. So I'm going to, make a point about that. Like debate in itself is supposed to help you clarify what the differences are. So what we really need is if we're trying to bring people together, if we're trying to heal, if we're trying to move forward, then we need some different skills to use. Debate is helpful to clarify differences. Dialogue is what you need to move things forward. So you want to avoid debating facts and policy. You're really not going to get anywhere. And most people that I talk to find that they start off trying to have a dialogue and then they get into a debate And my strategy with that is to say out loud, oh, wow, I believe we are now in a debate, and then for you, you can decide and maybe even clarify. And so in this conversation right now, we're just clarifying our differences. And then you can work on that permission. Can we get back? Can we, you know, would it be all right for you to see if we can get back into some kind of dialogue so that we can like work on finding a common ground? So that would be a strategy to sort of, do that. Um, with that and with debate or what they're saying is, don't try to change the other person's mind or bait them into an argument. Um, and this is basically the last point. Absolutely. It is not one of the strategies and one of the things that I like to try and encourage you to do is like if you were to, put your hands up or you push someone, right? What our natural instinct to do is to push back. And so in just our natural like physical instincts is when someone pushes on us, we're gonna push back. Um, if you are actually trying to get someone to go along with you, then we have to learn how to guide. And that does not mean we're going to be pushing. The other thing is that people will say to me all the time, why are they doing something? Why are we making decisions that seem to not be in our best interest? And one of the things that I want to like emphasize is, as we're going to be here talking about one, how to let go, let go of this idea. Okay. Let go of this idea that facts change people. Let go of this idea that reason is the way that we get people to change their behavior. Okay. Um, I know that is what we want to be able to do. And most of our whole education, has taught us to be quote unquote problem solvers. I think of myself as being in recovery from being a problem solver. Okay. Um, that's not what changes people's behavior. It is, we are so much more complex. And that's actually the good thing. The good thing is that we are so much more complex. And so we need much more complexity. We also need to take more time to do these first few things, which is to find places for relatability, find a way to really understand where someone is coming from, take time to have some respectful dialogue back and forth and ask, do you also understand the other side? It is possible that maybe they haven't taken time to really explore the other side. And then to learn how to ask permission to see if you can continue the conversation and just introduce some different ideas on how to approach something. So, thank you for taking a few minutes to just listen and follow me on this. I hope you will look at this resource. I hope you will think about how you can develop those dialogue skills. And most importantly, I want to encourage you to really let go of this idea that facts change people, that we need more data, that this is just if they could just see the reality. um, Part of our reality is that it's complex, and the way you see something and the way that I see something, depending on the perspective or the direction we're coming from, could actually be very different things. And so what we have to be able to do is get up and go to the other side and try to um, take in that person's perspective. So thank you for watching. Please like and make a comment. I'm going to be making additional videos just talking about things I'm noticing and bringing resources that will help you have better conversations and hopefully help us all get to a place where we are actually working together, better together, and not so divided.